For the purposes of the declarations, I would like to confirm that we will be scrutinising items 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, and 20 of the Cabinet papers today. Agenda item 2 are declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? We have one in the chamber. It's Councillor James Henton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to declare that I am a member of the volunteers at the Neath Abbey Ironworks. So just to declare personal interest there.
In which item, please, Councillor Henton, on the papers? Do you want to pop your mic on? Sorry, Councillor Henton.
Sorry, I believe it's the cultural strategy.
Thank you for that, Councillor Henton. And Councillor Reynolds, you had your hand up?
Sorry, Chair, I'm not declaring interest. I was referring, basically wondering if we were going to look at the forward look programme at the end of this scrutiny meeting, or at any point in the scrutiny meeting, just checking that that was going to take place, because I have a question on that. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Reynolds, is on the scrutiny agenda for today to consider.
Councillor Percy.
Paddison, did you mean? Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, it's Councillor Paddison is.
Yeah, I also have not got an interest to declare, but I wondered when in the schedule you wanted to mention about how many items are on the agenda. You tell me when you want me to bring that up.
Yes, it can be read to you now, Councillor Paddison. Is that okay?
That's fine. Thank you very much. Yes, I do wish to give some thoughts of concern to the scrutiny that is possible with the number of items we have on the agenda today, and the number of later reports also. I have received chairs training and from the council, and they say 3 or 4 items for decision is about right for scrutiny. Today we have 7, and I just wanted to say that, in my opinion, it's not the best that we can do. It's probably legal still, but it's not the best that we can do as a council. And I think if we limit the number of items to what is told to you when you do go to chairs training, we possibly have better outcomes. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Councillor Paddison. Councillor Clement Williams.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and I wanted to add what Councillor Paddison had said. It isn't just about the amount of things on the agenda, it's the amount of page reading that there is. I mean, it's well over 600 pages when you include the extra reports as well. And it's just, it is too much for one meeting. And I know we brought this up a number of times, and I know that there are reasons. I know that there are time scales. To be honest with you, I gotta say, I'd rather have had one in recess with half of this on it than have it all now. It's just an awful lot. You will lose concentration, and even somebody with the best will in the world will lose, you know, thoughts as they're going through all of this information. You can't possibly retain it all. We've asked in the past about it. We've been told it will be looked at. We've asked in the past, should we have more meetings? So some feedback, please. And I do get it, and I appreciate all the work that goes into it as well. But we are supposed to be doing our jobs too, and it's an awful lot to ask in one meeting. Thank you, Chair.
We now move on to agenda item 3, which are the minutes of the previous meetings.
Are we going to have any feedback on that from somebody, please?
I think just to say, really, we take on board what both yourself, Councillor Clement-Williams and Councillor Patterson have said. So I didn't respond because I thought you've made a valid point there, haven't you? We'll need to take that away and look at the work that's coming up. And without, jumping ahead to the item on the Outlook report, that's one of the reasons why, that proposal has been put forward around the panel. So there may be other ways, as well as the formal meetings of the scrutiny committees, etc., that we could be creating to help members to understand all this information that's coming forward, because I think we're going to have a very, very busy autumn. So it is important that we are giving attention to the right things in the right places. So any suggestions the members have got outside of the formal meetings and the forward work programming, maybe that could be another angle that we could give some consideration to. I'm very happy to meet with members if that would be useful as well, with Craig and with Stacey, just to see if there's anything else we can do to help you.
Okay, thank you. I just a nod of acknowledgement, really, was what I was looking for. Chair. Thank you for that, Karen. Do appreciate it.
Chair, if I may as well, there was.
Yeah, okay, Councillor Patterson, do you want to come back in?
Thank you very much. There was something I raised in the pre-brief as well, alongside the list of the items, that the IT, as well as having all of that volume of nearly 700 pages or 600 pages of details, that the IT system that we are using currently has failed us, and that the delivery of the items had to be done in a different way. And all throughout the meeting today, because I haven't got bookmark facilities, it's going to take me longer to scroll through all the reports that I have got. I have got everything I need, I'm not saying that, but it's not in the same format as I'm used to. And on a heavy agenda, I just wanted to have a little whinge. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Patterson. Now I'm going to bring in Craig Griffiths to answer the question.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Councillor Patterson. It is one of the inherent issues, obviously, of the ModGov system and the way it is structured for when reports are added. We take on board what you say. What we'll do is we'll have a chat with ModGov to see if there is any alternative way that it could be looked at. I don't think there will be, but we will certainly try and explore that to see if we can make it more straightforward.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Are all members happy with the responses received from the officers at the moment?
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So we now move on to agenda item 3, which is the minutes of the previous meetings, and they're attached on pages 5 to 21 in the agenda pack. If you feel these are an accurate record of the meetings, can I please have a proposer and a seconder to approve these minutes?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Happy to second, Chair.
They've been proposed and seconded in the chamber. Thank you. So we're now going to move on to agenda item 4, which is the annual report. These can be found on pages 23 to 44. I'm going to introduce the report. This is an annual report for the year 22 to 23, and it sets out the work of the committee. Do any of the members have any questions to add to the report? Recommendation is listed on page 24 of the Cabinet Scrutiny Agenda Pack. Can I please have a proposer and a seconder?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Hint.
Do we have a seconder, please?
Happy second, Chair.
Thank you. The members, please indicate if they wish to abstain.
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this recommendation is approved.
I can see no indications to the contrary, Chair. The recommendation is approved.
Thank you, Alison. So we're now moving on to agenda item number 5, which is the pre-decision scrutiny. We're now going to move to the agenda, Cabinet Board agenda, sorry. This can be found in the Outlook supplement pack, which is agenda item 7. I'm now going to pass you over to the Chief Executive, Karen Jones.
So thank you very much, Chair. Just wanted to make a very brief introduction to the report and just explain what its purpose is really, just to make sure that that's clear for members. So as you know, every year we have a series of members' seminars as we get into the budget process to take members through the detail of the assumptions that we're making when we build in the budget up. And unfortunately, over many years now, we always end up with a budget gap. So we're looking then at strategies, aren't we, to close the gap, and that usually comprises of ways in which we can raise new income or ways in which we can reduce expenditure to get to a position where we've got a balanced budget position as we go forward into the future years. So this report is not intended to take the place of that. I was asked that question earlier this week. What this is meant to be is a bit of scene setting for you before we get into that process, just to paint a very high level picture, I guess, of the fact that our money is reducing, but unfortunately the demands that we're seeing in many parts of the council system are going in the opposite direction. So I thought it would be helpful before we start the budget process in earnest, just to paint that high level picture for you. And you will see that I mentioned in the report that inflation was expected to rise to 7.1%, but of course this morning we've had a report that it's actually dropped to 6.7%. And I guess what that does is underlines how volatile the position is at the moment. It's very, very difficult to forward plan other than basing our planning on a range of scenarios. We don't know what the settlement is going to be for next year at the moment. So we've based it on 3.1% Welsh Government has announced, but I think it's very much a set of moving parts at the moment, and I'm sure who would agree with that. So it wasn't my intention to go through the report in detail. Obviously, if there are questions the members have got on the information itself, it was there, as I say, just to paint a bit of a high-level picture. You'll get a lot more detail as we move into the budget process itself. I think the one thing that is probably worth highlighting is the timetable. So you'll have seen at the back end of the report that the Chancellor's announcement, autumn statement, is not going to be until the 22nd of November. The Welsh Government have moved their announcement of the draft Welsh Government budget back to the 19th of December. So we're going to have very little time at the end of the process to respond around whatever figure is provided for local government. So that was part of the thinking, I think, that Councillor Noyle has done around the idea of a panel. It's not to replace any of the usual mechanisms. It's an additional mechanism to give members as much opportunity to shape the development of the strategy as we move through the autumn now and into the winter period. And unfortunately as well, it's going to limit the amount of public consultation we're going to be able to do on the overall budget proposal because of the way in which the timetable is going to unfold. So as you know, we've been running the Let's Keep Talking campaign since the summer to get very early feedback from the communities. That'll conclude around the 8th of October, and we'll be bringing the results of that back to members probably by around the end of October. But I think what we will be doing, because of the size of the budget gap that we're facing and the limited time we're going to have at the back end of the process, we're probably going to be bringing proposals that require policy or service decisions forward earlier. So that should mean that scrutiny committees and members in particular can then have earlier sight of the detail of the proposal and give their feedback at a point where we are still very much shaping the way in which we will respond around all of this next year. So I hope that explains why the report is in front of you today, what its main purpose is. It obviously seeks approval from the Cabinet as well to establish this panel. But I'm sure if there's any questions on the detail of the report, my colleagues are here around the room will probably be able to give you a lot more detail than I can on it. But as I say, it's meant to just set the scene for you and to help really with those more detailed conversations we'll have now over the coming months.
Thank you, Karen. Before we open it up to questions for the officers and members, can I bring in the Cabinet Member for Finance, which is Councillor Noyle, please?
Thank you, Carl. I actually not going to come in at this point, so I'm going to leave it to Hugh to speak and Karen to speak. Thank you on this one.
Thank you for that, Simon. Councillor Patterson, your question?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I was just wondering where this group will sit in sort of organisational of the council? Because we have task and finish groups, we have committees. Is this a far more loose, casual arrangement? And my main question was, would it be pro rata on political groups as our committees are? Thank you.
So we've got other examples, Councillor Paterson, in the past of the Cabinet setting up panels in the same way as scrutiny committees can often set up task and finish groups. So this is a formal meeting. It's not an informal arrangement, and there's no requirement for the panel itself to be politically balanced in the way we would normally have proportions of members on there. But what you will see from the proposal is that every political group will be represented on that panel, and obviously there's opportunities then for those members to be bringing information from their respective political groups into feedback as well. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does answer the question, but I'll take that answer back, and I'll ponder on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. We're now going to move on to the recommendation, which is listed on page 12 of the Cabinet Supplement Pack. Can I please have a proposer and a seconder?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hinton.
A second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to the Cabinet.
I can see no indications to the contrary, Chair, so the recommendations are supported Cabinet.
Thank you, Alison. And now we're going to move on to agenda item 9, which is the Remembrance Parades for Neath and for Talbot. These can be found on pages 39 to 90. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report?
No, thank you, Chair. Nothing further to add.
Thank you. Do members have any questions for the officers? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you again, Chair. As I said in pre-brief, I'm fully supportive of the council's supporting these parades. I think they're pretty universally accepted as a very good thing for us. The only question I have is regarding the money and how we cost because it says there that the costings, they seem to be very large, and I just wondered if somebody could break down the costings. Do we not have our own equipment, or do we rent it out, or how is the costing worked out? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I'm going to bring in Nolwenn Daniel.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Thank you, Councillor Patterson, for the question. So this is the first time that Neath Talbot Council have taken over responsibility for organising these remembrance parades. So it's been a steep learning curve for staff, and huge credit to the teams really coming together to ensure that these remembrance parades were going to take place. I know how important that was to the local communities and to the veterans, etc., and everybody else involved with this. So in terms of your direct question around the costs, the majority of those costs are related to the service that Amberon provide in terms of the road closures. Both parades in Neath and in Port Talbot are using our highway, which therefore have to be closed for the purposes of these parades. So the bulk of those costs are associated with Amberon, together with some costs regarding St John's Ambulance, the first aid provision, and actually marshals for closing off specific points along the highway. What we've identified is an opportunity moving forward, however, if we can train our staff in terms of the preparation of the traffic management plans, and we've certainly got the infrastructure to actually physically close the roads, but if we can train our staff up to prepare the traffic management plans, then we'll be in a position to reduce those costs moving forward for future years. Diolch.
Thank you, Nolwenn. Are you okay with that, Councillor Patterson?
Yes, I'm very grateful for that answer and quite heartened by the response. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now to bring in Councillor Sonia Reynolds, please.
Thank you. I'm extremely supportive of these parades, I have to say, and of all the remembrance events across the county borough. However, the funding for this that the Neath Talbot Council, as has been said, it for the first time is taking responsibility for, is for our two towns only. No funding for Pontardawe, yet or for any other of the parades in the upper valleys or the ceremonies, all of which other bodies try and fund and resource on their own. And I am concerned that there's an element of unfairness in this, and that there's a need to consider the wider picture across the local authority. We do have a note in the report that says no valleys impact. Well, the very unfairness itself is an impact on the valleys. There is money being spent, and it is not in any way coming up to the valleys. So, I think I would ask people to look at that. I don't want to stop the parades in Port Talbot and Neath. I think they're very valuable, but I also value those outside, and I know many of them have had to be racked back, had to not do things because they couldn't afford road closures, etc. So please, can there be wider consideration? We have to fund across the piece, or we have to reconsider how this can go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Now going to bring in Chief Executive Karen Jones.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds, for the points you've made there. What I would say in the first instance is that the parades in Neath and Port Talbot were unable to progress last year because the arrangements had broken down. So the reason why we've focused on Neath and Port Talbot is we've had a very, very clear set of feedback from the community, particularly the veteran community, that they were distressed that they were unable to march last year. So that's the reason why we focused on Port Talbot and Neath. We've not had those approaches from any other part of the county borough. So if there are any other parades that are struggling, we're not aware of those. And of course, in some of those areas, and I know this is always a controversial issue as well, there are town councils as well that can sometimes help in some of those other communities as well, Britain Ferry being one of them, for example. So, what I would say is if there are any of those other areas that are struggling to maintain these really important traditions, we're always very happy to have a conversation about it. But the reason why it's Neath and Port Talbot is because those arrangements had completely broken down last year, and this is the council responding to the community. I have asked for a review of events and festivals across the county borough to be carried out. And I'm aware that when you had a conversation back in the last Policy and Resources Cabinet Board, I think it was, about some of the grants that had come through the miscellaneous grants process, that who probably told you that at the time. And I think there is a real need for us to be clear in terms of our policy as to what we are directly involved with and supporting, and the form of support that we are making to these festivals and events. So that's clear for everybody, and members are taking a very clear decision about that, and where we will be more in a supportive or advisory role going forward. Because, as I said in the earlier report, our budget's looking very, very difficult for next year. So all of these extra expenditures that come forward, that's going to always be at the expense of something else that we could have done. So I think you're going to have a really tricky time of it over the next year or so as members, making those tough choices about what we are going to be able to use the council's funds to support, but where actually we're going to be stepping back and perhaps providing more of an enabling role rather than a direct funding or a direct management role. So hopefully that explains why Neath and Port Talbot. But as I say, if there are any others out there struggling, I'm not aware of it. As far as I'm aware, they're all planning to go ahead pretty much on the same basis as they did last year. But we will have this wider look at events and festivals, and I'll come back before members, probably around about the springtime, I think.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Reynolds, do you want to come back in on that?
Thank you very much, Karen. That's really helpful. I'll look forward to that. Can I ask, therefore, that we consider how we use the Valley's impact monitoring statement as well on reports like this, and just put a consideration in there because there's no point in doing it if we don't indicate, the realities of a situation. So, please can we review that more tightly with all reports? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. I've got one more question in the chamber, Councillor Boyne.
Yeah, it's not a question, Chair. It's just a thank you to officers and members for allowing this parade to go ahead this year as Forces Champion for the MPT. I think this is really crucial that we do look after the veterans and so forth. There was a big disappointment in the last couple of years due to COVID and last year. But like I said, big thank you to everybody for funding this and allowing it to go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyne. Back to Councillor Clement Williams. Sorry I missed you earlier, but are you ready to come
No,
in?
it's fine, Chair. If you recall, I said it would depend on what the others got answered, whether I would ask or not. So, as we all know, we're all living in a mad world at the moment. We got war going on in Ukraine, and the financial situation is really, really bad. And the rise of the right is something that really I'm not getting political. The rise of the right, though, is something that concerns me. I think if there's any time we need to be remembering what happened in the war, all wars, is now. Is our young people, it's really important that they understand what it was all about. So I wholeheartedly support this. I was concerned about Pontardawe because in the last term, we always had a representative from the Cabinet in Pontardawe, and most of the time it was myself or Annette that went. So I'm pleased to hear that that is continuing. My one question, though, would be a technical one. It notes that the contribution from reserves will be required. I was just checking whether that would be general reserves or a specific reserve. And perhaps you may not be able to answer this now because Karen's alluded to a review. But moving forward, which area would the money be coming from? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clement Williams. So in terms of the request for this year's pull from reserves, that would come from the General Reserve. And as the Chief Executive has alluded to, there will be a full review of events where the Council is making either a financial contribution or a contribution in kind to make sure we're very clear in terms of what the ask is going forward. So this Remembrance Service ask will be considered as part of that and reported back to the Cabinet and obviously scrutiny in the spring. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Absolutely, and welcome back. I hope you had a lovely holiday.
Thank you. Diolch.
There's no more questions. So members, the recommendations are listed on page 42 to 43 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. Can I please have a proposer and a seconder?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
Second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Boyne. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to the Cabinet.
I can see no indications to the contrary, Chair, so the recommendations are supported, Cabinet.
Thank you. Now we can move on to agenda item 10, which is the culture and destination strategies. These can be found on pages 91 to 240. Please note the following appendices will follow. As supplements, Appendix A, Culture Strategy. Appendix B is Destination Management Plan. We move over to Chris Saunders.
Thanks, Chair. I'm fairly new around Neath Talbot, so for anybody that I haven't met before, hello, Chris Saunders, Head of Leisure, Tourism, Heritage and Culture. These reports were subject to an all members seminar last week, so we've done a presentation to members and been through the strategies in detail, adopted some of the comments back from members and embedded them in the latest documents that you see where appropriate. So we have a short presentation if members wanted to repeat that today. It was on, it's obviously been recorded and online for members to view. But happy to take questions on the strategies.
We're now going to move to questions. Can I call in Councillor Percy, please?
Diolch Cadeirydd, Chris, for the report today. Obviously, as Chris has already mentioned, we've gone through these reports last week in a fair bit of detail, but I've got one specific question on the culture strategy, or a point really I just want to emphasise more than anything in terms of the action plan, and that's just on page 42 of the culture strategy in relation to sport. And there's a point there about commissioning a sports facilities need assessment and strategy action plan. It's very welcome to see that in the report and in the strategy. Is something I've been advocating for a long time, and really reflects some of the feedback that I've had from the community around understanding what the sport provision is in Neath Talbot. I just wanted to make the point, and also I suppose an offer as well, that it's really important in terms of the remit of that, which I think that the document acknowledges the scope's yet to be determined, that does include understanding the tenure of our sports facilities, who is running them, whether they're schools, community sports clubs, and particularly facilities where there's been sustainability issues. I've got one in my ward which has been through several leases and several organisations. Those issues affect access to those facilities in reality. So they may exist physically, but actually it's very difficult for them to be used. So I wanted to make that point. And say that if officers do want to discuss that particular issue with myself, I'd be quite happy to give some feedback that I've had from both sports groups wanting to access facilities, clubs who've got ideas for facilities where there are gaps in the county, and also feedback in terms of the management of existing facilities as well. I'd be very happy to feed that into the process, but I just wanted to make that point today, Chair. Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Can we go in the order of the questions raised in the pre-briefing earlier? We're going to get a response of Chris Saunders for your question in Councillor Percy.
Thanks, Councillor Percy. Yeah, and for the comments about putting the needs assessment in there, you'll notice that the appendices have obviously got the initial report from KKP around some of that. So yeah, happy to take that on board and come and have a chat when we're at the right time to put the scope together.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm fully supportive of both strategies. I think the council, are going in the right direction for that. For those strategies. My question is around how many members of staff would be involved to deliver these two strategies, and whether or not they are dependent on any grant funding that may or may not dry up, and thinking about the sustainability going forward. So do we how many members of staff? That's to do with staff. And then there is one other question that I would like, a list of the partnership agencies that we are actually working with. They may be buried in the report, and if they are, I apologise, but I may not have got that deep into them because of the number of reports that we have today. So if we could have a list of the partner agencies, and if that could be updated as and when we take on new ones, and also how many members of staff will be involved, and do their salaries depend on any grant funding? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Batson. So in terms of staffing, at the moment within the base to deliver the cultural strategy, you've got me. And on the tourism side, of the destination side, you've got Carly and one other member of staff. Within the heritage strategy, I'm sure we'll move on to, there's Delith, who's on screen, and another couple of members of staff, but they're currently grant funded. So there are a couple of grant funded staff there. There's a couple of grant funded staff currently within Carly's team. We are looking for grant funded staff for other things to fulfill this strategy. Absolutely, we've got a few irons in the fire. We cannot deliver this on our own. You know, we will need a bit of capacity around it. We've had some conversations around those grant funding. We're keen to put that in on a permanent level rather than on a temporary level, and sort of those general fluctuations. But of course, there's some risks around the funding, and you've heard the chief executive talk about the budget and the risks there. So we are. It is definitely a capacity issue. You'll also notice there that we talk about cultural partnership quite a lot within the cultural strategy, and you know, this is a council-led document. We don't see this as a council-delivered document. The actions are very much about partnership with organisations and putting together some sort of cultural partnership and destination partnership will help make sure that, you know, these are properly embedded and it doesn't all fall back to the council to do everything. You know, we will fail if that becomes the case. In terms of partnership agencies, there isn't a list as such, and sort of, you know, but we are talking to, you know, Arts Council Wales, we're talking to Heritage Lottery, we're talking to the destination groups. There's plenty of others, NRW, CADU, Visit Wales. So they're all being, you know, all being talked to through this process, or being, you know, informally consulted with through this process. If you wanted a list, I'm sure we can go away and put one together, but I probably want a slightly clearer steer on exactly what you're after.
Basically, I was just trying to establish who the council would be going into partnership on these two strategies. So if we're going to be having reports from yourself or from any other person updating us regularly, there's probably not any need. But I just think that as a member, I'd like to know for the deliverability of these two strategies, which I'm fully behind. I'd just like to know who we're actually in business with, type of thing.
Okay, sorry, that's useful, thank you. So the cultural partnership I see as a sort of a spanning a quite a wide group, and actually I've got some work to start in Swansea University to put some of those terms together. So we would look to engage the NHS, we would look to engage local industry, we would look to engage local young people. And actually, coming out of the members' seminar last week, there was a very strong feeling about embedding the sort of the Welsh language and the Welsh culture within that partnership as well. So we would look to talk to someone like Mentor Neath, who I've probably pronounced very badly, but they would. So it's those sorts of organisations, but we'd be put together that spec, and it's the same sort of principle on the destination side in terms of that sort of governance piece there. So with that sort of destination group, which I think Carly's found really quite difficult to get really good engagement with the trade actually on a consistent basis. So we're hoping this gives us a better anchor to be able to get that going. I suppose put a bit of energy behind it.
Yeah, I just think it would be clearer to members to know who we are partnering with, so that we can understand the links in and how we are binding all the strategies together. So thank you very much for that answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Carol Clement-Williams.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies, I didn't go to the seminar last week. I was busy being a taxi for a member of the family to the hospital, I'm afraid. So I'll need to catch up on that. Firstly, welcome, Chris. It's nice to meet you, figuratively meet you. So my question was, in the consultation, it says that the majority of people were 30 to 74. And I know, you know, sometimes it can be difficult to get everyone to participate in these things, but just hoping, so I don't necessarily need a lengthy answer, but just hoping that moving forward we look at why we didn't get a response from them and what we can do to cover that hole, e.g. go out and actively ask those questions to people to get their input as well. And I think that's very important. The other question you had was about the consultants, the cost of consultants. And I know we've done an awful lot of work, and I would commend all the officers for all the work they've put into this strategy, because it's been ongoing for a very long time, and I know the work that's gone in. But wasn't that something, you know, did they actually come up with something we hadn't thought of before? And it triggered something while after the pre-brief was, I know that we've had a consultant's report in the past, and I'm not going to say what it was. And I found that it was something we could have done ourselves. After we've had a consultant's report, and bearing in mind every penny is precious at the moment, do we review whether it was worth paying that money to the... It's very often when we had consultants in, they'd go around talking to our staff, and our staff would come up with the ideas, and all they did was put it in a report and have an awful lot of money from us. So that would be my input, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Probably share your view of consultants the majority of the time, actually, but I can absolutely assure you on this occasion that Council Culture, who helped us with the culture strategy, have been worth every penny. Actually, they've been absolutely excellent, and really got into some of the nuts and bolts of what sort of the culture block means to the people in Neath Talbot. And actually, going back to the previous questions from Councillor Patterson, you know, there is no capacity to do that within the organisation currently. So buying that in is really important. And of course, I suppose they've been a sort of neutral arbiter in some of that as well, haven't they? So being able to sort of hold us to account, but also push back on a few of the things that perhaps the community is sort of requesting unreasonably in some cases. And I know Planning Solutions, who wrote or helped us write the destination strategy, were very linked in with Carly, and you know, people we've used before, and I'm sure we'll use again in other scenarios, and actually have been very good. But yeah, I you know, use consultants carefully, I think would be my but they've been excellent on this occasion. In terms of the consultation results, as you mentioned, it's quite hard to get slizzard answers out of that age group. You know, Counterculture were actively seeking that. We got a really good response, actually, probably more than I think it was certainly more than last year's budget response as well from a wider people. So I think that's a pretty good response, and there's always things we can do to improve it, I'm sure. Just picking up on the younger persons I mentioned just now about that cultural partnership involving younger people, I think that would be really important going forward.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you both. No, thank you, Chris. I'd like to bring in Andrew Thomas.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Just to add really a little bit to what Chris has just said, he's absolutely right when he talked about capacity. You know, capacity was basically vested in him, and I'm sure you all know, and I certainly do, that he had an awful lot of things to do when he took a post. And I can tell you that some of the funding organisations we've been speaking to, I say we, Chris in the main, but also the Chief Exec, I think people like the Heritage Lottery, Arts Council for Wales, Visit Wales, they are very impressed with the profile that this council, members, officers have given the cultural strategy, the destination strategy. And I'm sure that in the future that will stand us in really good stead. In fact, they've told us this, that when it comes to grant award and funding, the fact that we've got a strategy now, hopefully after today, but also the prominence that members and officers give the cultural strategy, it'll stand us in really good stead when it comes to attracting grant funding going into the future.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Reynolds, you brought a question up in the pre-brief. Do you want to bring the question in?
Yes, thank you. It was just in the seminar. Several of us had points in terms of the culture strategy and the destination strategy about transport issues, and it was something I wanted to raise in a much more public forum and ensure that it was an issue which could register concerns and was being looked at over time. I understand fully that we don't have direct control of the transport systems. We have very small budgets linked to provision, and it's hard to sort. But we need to make sure or see if we can link into wider strategies, particularly transport, because it is an issue for these sorts of policies and strategies going forward.
Thanks, Councillor Reynolds. And yeah, that point was not lost on us at the members' briefing. And as you say, it's quite difficult to put something within the strategy wording because of the sort of the light touch nature of what we've got here. But actually, the transport around the area is pretty key. I know it's a key fundamental issue for the council as a whole. So it's something that on the destination side, on the cultural side, that we intend to try and exploit where we're able to, try and help where we're able to.
Thank you. Any more questions by members? Members, the recommendations are listed on page 98 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. Can I please have a proposer and a seconder?
I would propose, Chair.
A second,
Happy
Chair.
to say.
Thank you. The members, please indicate if they wish to abstain.
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I can see no indications to the contrary, Chair. The recommendation is supported to Cabinet.
Thank you, Alison. Now moving on to agenda item 11, which is the heritage strategy. These can be found on pages 241 to 264. And please note, the following appendixes will follow as a supplement as Appendix A in the draft heritage strategy. I'll pass you over to Chris Saunders.
Thank you, Chair. Pleased to see that Delith and Bethan are both on the call if questions get difficult. Just to point out that unlike the last two strategies, this one, which are for adoption, this one is a draft for authorization to go out for consultation. It's a slightly different funding arrangement as we went through. And hence that slight difference is worth pointing that out. So again, this was subject to the members' briefing last week. So hopefully members have either watched the back or managed to attend. And we picked up a number of comments within that draft and fed them into the final draft that you've got in the pack today. It has been a slightly arduous process, I have to say. So thank you for bearing with us in getting that report distributed and sent out to you.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Patterson, you have a question?
You're on mute, Councillor Patterson.
My comments were really around all the strategies in front of us today. So it was a generic question that would apply to all of them about the funding, about the partnerships. So I think they've been answered really, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I'm now going to move on to recommendations, and these are listed on page 247 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. Can I again please have a proposer and a seconder?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Happy to second, Chair.
Yes, thank you both. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I see no abstentions, Chair.
Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I can see no indications to the contrary, Chair. The recommendations are supported to Cabinet.
Thank you, Alison. We're now going on to agenda item 12, which is the Q1 revenue budget and monitoring, which can be found on pages 265 to 284. Passing over to Hugh Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just very briefly go through some key points with members, if I may, Chair. So if I refer to page 266 on the reports pack, the second paragraph talks of an overspend projected to be 2.867 million, with details in the table below. Just to close off the question that came up in the pre-briefing, that's an overspend of 2.8 million after we draw down £3.5 million from general reserves, as was agreed by Cabinet and Council when we set this budget back in March. At the foot of page 266, you will see that we have worked out the effect of the proposed pay award for NJC Green Book staff, but that pay award is still not agreed. So this is a just sort of a position at a point in time, and if that changes, obviously, then the overspend may go up or down depending on what is actually agreed. And I've assumed in this report that members would be agreeable to using the pay contingency that we set aside to fund the additional cost of that pay award. And just one more thing to mention, Chair, if I may, please, on page 267, the third paragraph, and what we'll be looking to do now as a result of this overspend is to try and bring forward any cost savings and income generation measures we can in year, subject to them being within existing policy frameworks, because obviously as a corporate directors group, we will be looking to bring this overspend down throughout the remainder of the financial year. And I've included that in one of the recommendations on page 274 of the report, Chair. So I won't talk through the individual directorate positions. I'm sure directors can take questions themselves in terms of their own service areas, but happy to open up to questions, Chair. Thank you very much. Diolch.
Thank you, Hugh. We go in the order that they were brought up in the pre-brief, and we call in Councillor Clement Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think, to be honest with you, Hugh's answered most of my questions from the pre-brief in his response there, apart from the home to school transport. It's not so much of a question about it, because it's obvious why you know, things in there would be difficult. Just a point about I did ask in previous meetings about whether we were looking at maybe other councils, other places across the world of maybe a different or innovative. I'm not being critical. I know things are really awkward in the transport system at the moment, which is why I'm just thinking outside the box to see if somebody is just looking at that. But it would be remiss of me again. I always have and I always will thank the member of the financial teams for all the work, because I know how much work literally goes on all year round to pull all this stuff together. So I wanted to thank all staff for all the work they've done here and his team. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Carol, for your question. A couple of things, just in terms of the in-year overspend. That is a result of routes. They're not additional routes, they're new routes, I suppose. And by that, I mean, these are routes which existed previously. They were tendered in 2017. We asked the contractors if they would extend the contract, because we thought that would be the most cost-efficient way of providing home-to-school transport. Those contractors didn't want to, presumably post-COVID. So we had to re-tender them, and that additional £448,000 is just the additional cost following a re-tendering exercise. Now, obviously, inflation is running still at an all-time, well, not an all-time high, but you know, in excess of what it used to be. So that's the reason for the in-year spend. And just in terms of what are we doing to try and mitigate the increased cost of homeschool transport per se, we do intend to engage with some people who do work across the United Kingdom, not just Wales. Well versed. They've worked with us previously. They were very successful in driving down costs, you know, permanently, not just well, not permanently, but certainly over a fixed period of time. Unfortunately, over the years, those costs have crept back in, and that's no fault of anybody. It's just the way, you know, there's been a bit of a perfect storm in terms of home to school transport, with rising costs of vehicles and petrol, etc., diesel. So we are looking to bring somebody in who is very experienced in helping us with capacity and capability to drive down the cost of home to school transport. And that, I have to say, and I would point out, that's without adapting or changing any of our policy, which means we won't be affecting any entitlement that young people have to home to school transport. So I think that's a really important point.
Chair, can I just thank Andrew for that comprehensive response, and I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Councillor Clement-Williams. I'm going to keep it in the order of the questions raised in the pre-brief. Apologies, Councillor Patterson. I'm going to call in Councillor Percy, please.
Diolch, Cadeirydd, thank you. Yeah, but before I come to my question, I just want to point out in terms of how the budget savings monitoring has been presented in the report today. It's actually much better than we've had previously. It's really clear. So I just want to thank officers for taking on board that feedback. We've got reference numbers and I really appreciate that. So I'm referring to accommodation on page 281, which is ACC1, which was the first phase of the accommodation strategy, which we've had quite a bit of scrutiny over previously. And I can see in the table that we've achieved 113k of the savings from that proposal, which was 5 buildings being affected. I just wanted clarity. I'm not sure if we've got an officer present who's got knowledge of the specific work that's been undertaken. But we had quite a long discussion previously over whether the savings proposals included our business rates costs for the buildings we were retaining ownership of. I'm just wondering if officers can give an update on what's happened with the buildings in that proposal and whether there's any further savings that can be identified down the line. Diolch.
Nicola, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. As members know, the work that we've been doing in terms of the accommodation strategy is taking some time because some of the buildings were leased from other organisations, and one such organisation was unprepared for us to relinquish that lease. The buildings that we've been able to repurpose are currently the subject of some discussions on what capital investment was required to enable that repurposing of those buildings. So that is currently under review. But in the meantime, we are looking at what additional buildings or parts thereof could be utilised for alternative purposes so that we can reduce our footprint, therefore reduce our operating costs and our carbon footprint as well. It's not going to be a piece of work that will happen overnight because it's going to take some time for us to analyse all the condition surveys for the building, the needs of staff, and other organisations who are utilising our buildings to ensure that we are able to provide an efficient service on behalf of the council, minimise costs, and also to retain staff that are working within the council. So that piece of work is ongoing and will be subject to a more comprehensive strategy going forward.
Thank you, Nicola. Again, we're going back to the order of questions raised. Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about page 27. Sorry, page 271. It's me trying to do things too quickly. On the council tax reduction scheme underspend, given the cost of living issues that we're dealing with and the issues that people are having, I'm quite concerned that we are to know that we are promoting this properly, that people are getting the information and the support that they need, but also wondered if some of it and linked it with the item on the expansion of welfare rights service and whether that's had an impact. I know there will be a full report on the impact of the welfare rights service to other scrutiny committees, but whether that might have had an impact on this, but just a concern around that and wonder if there was an issue at all. Thank you.
Bring in Hugh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Reynolds. So in terms of the welfare rights service, obviously you remember we did put funding in to increase capacity in that service this year, recognising the cost of living crisis. I wouldn't be able to comment directly as to whether that capacity's had any sort of tangible effect in terms of take up on council tax support. What I would say, which is positive in terms of across the county borough, is there are 2,000 people less now claiming council tax support than there were during the height of the COVID pandemic. So that's part of the reason why there's an underspend in the budget, is that we'd left more in the budget than we needed to, because we didn't know really what the sort of ongoing COVID legacy would look like. But as I say, that the latest figures of today, which is supersedes the report, is there are 15,681 people claiming council tax support now, where it was over 17,500 back in 2020. So that's the only comment I can make on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Hugh. We're now going to bring in Chief Executive Karen Jones.
Like, just expand a little bit on the welfare rights point, because I think it might be useful if we bring another report for members on the entirety of the support that we've now got in place to support people who are experiencing financial hardship. So you'll know from other reports that we've been able to get ourselves in a position to deliver the free school meals policy programme from September this year. So that will be, helping people in terms of financial hardship, in addition to the extra posts that were put into the budget through the arrangements earlier this year. I know that the Welfare Rights Service also brought in additional grant, so they've been able to increase beyond the 2 posts we agreed as part of the budget. Linked to that, we've been able to direct some of the Shared Prosperity Fund money into using something called the Low Income Family Tracker. And what that enables us to do is to target those people that we know are unlikely to have maximised the benefit entitlement. So we've got data that allows us to target the people that are most likely to not be claiming what they could be claiming. We've got more capacity in the council to help to actually then support them with those benefit applications. And we've also been talking with partners such as Citizens Advice, for example, to make sure that they are accessing any grants or whatever that they're entitled to. So I think there's quite a lot going on around support for cost of living. And if members are interested, what I think I could ask Noelwyn to do, because he's going to take over the chairing of the partnership group from me, is that we perhaps just put a list of all of this together for you and send it around by email, just to make sure that you've got that at your fingertips. And if you're coming across constituents that could benefit from accessing that support, or organisations even that could be part of our Warm Spaces network, hopefully that would help you then with dealing with some of those representations.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Patterson, sorry for the wait.
No, listen, don't apologise, Chair. It was a question that I hadn't thought of in the pre-brief, so thank you very much. I just wanted to ask Andrew Thomas about the home-to-school transport, and I presume that we are trying to cut some money on what we spend on it. And I know that you were very kindly directing me to Rhiannon Crowhurst to deal with a specific matter. But the question comes up, is it something that residents are finding hard to do if they are given an allowance rather than a taxi company to use to get children with ALN needs to school and back? Is it a one-off in my case with my ward, or is it something that officers are having issues raised by residents that it's not working for them? So I just wanted to know how much of a problem, or is it indeed a problem for residents now that we are changing the way that we get the children to school?
I haven't heard it is, and I probably would have if it was a real, maybe the odd case. I think, but more importantly, Suzanne, it's a parental choice. So they get the choice as to where they get the payment, or we provide transport. So it's not something we impose on them. So it's so as a result, if somebody elects to do that, I wouldn't have thought there would be too much of a problem. Now, of course, there may be circumstances will change within a family and it's no longer possible. In which case, it's our legal responsibility, as long as certain criteria are met, to make sure that we provide assistance with home to school transport. But as I say, the entitlement is never taken away. It's just the mechanism that we use.
Well, that's heartening to know, because I didn't know if it was a problem or whether it was just that my resident had their problem and it was a one-off. So I'm grateful for that, and I haven't had the opportunity to liaise with Rhiannon yet. So thanks for the general. It's probably not a county-wide problem type thing. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. There's no more questions in the chamber or online. So, members, the recommendations are listed on page 274 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. Can I please have a proposer and a seconder?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Thank you. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to the Cabinet. Thank you.
I can't see any indications to the contrary, Chair. So the recommendation is supported Cabinet.
Thank you, Alison. So now moving on to agenda item 13, which is quarter one, capital budget monitoring. And these can be found on pages 285 to 298 of the pack. Thank you. Officers, would you like to add anything to the report?
Again, just very briefly, Chair, just want to draw members' attention really to Appendix 1. And what I've tried to do there again is to try and provide some more meaningful information to members in terms of a comments column. So where variances look significant in terms of why haven't we spent any money yet, in terms of some of these major schemes, I try to provide sort of fairly plain English, simple information for members so they can understand what I'm trying to say, not just reporting in numbers. So just a bit of narrative, Chair, just sort of to ease for members really. So that's all. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Hugh. Again, we'll go into the order that we brought up in the pre-brief, and it's Councillor Patterson first, please.
I do apologise, Chair. I seem to be monopolising things here today, but the question, Hugh, is the cost of living increase affecting our capital budgets? Because I understand that when you forecast how much something it might cost in a year or a year and a half's time, it might not actually be that. I just wondered if that was something to take note of, or whether you've actually put more contingencies in and we're okay on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Yes, certainly the cost of inflation is having an effect on the amount of work that we can do within the budget available, and increased cost of borrowing is having an effect in terms of what we call our capital financing costs, where we borrow money to fund capital works. So we don't have any specific pinch points at the moment that I'm aware of, but Nicola may want to come in and talk more about it, Chair. But yes, certainly, obviously, inflation is eroding the amount of work we can do within the amounts of money available, because Welsh Government funding isn't following in line with inflation or nowhere near it. So perhaps, Nicola, do you want to add something else? Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh.
We do have a small team of people who act as an intelligent client for the council. So we are constantly monitoring costs from the organisations that we are in contract with to deliver some of our capital programmes. We have constant meetings, multidisciplinary teams, to ensure that we are monitoring those costs, and if there is a necessity, we are value engineering them to ensure that we don't impose a budget strain on the council. So it's that constant monitoring that is helping us to deliver within those funding envelopes.
Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you, Nicola. We're going to bring in Simon Brennan, please.
Oh.
Thank you. I suppose just to add to that, inflation within the construction industry has been running much higher than normal inflation for many years.
Yeah.
That and the impact on with COVID on materials, etc., has had a significant impact on the construction industry and our ability to deliver projects within budget. That said, we've been able to manage it more or less so far, but it does get tougher and tougher each year. But I think, as Nicola said, it's a combination of being able to deal, I suppose, quite harshly sometimes with contractors to try and get it delivered within the cost envelope. And occasionally we have been able to secure additional funding from our funders, Welsh Government, UK Gov, etc., to cover additional costs.
I just want to say grateful thanks to our officers then, Chair, because, these are difficult times and they seem to be doing us proud. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson, Simon Brennan. Councillor Percy, a question?
No question, no, Chair. Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Members, the recommendations are listed on page 288 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. Can I please have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hinton.
Happy second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Members indicate if they wish to abstain.
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, Alison. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet. Thank you.
I can't see any indications to the contrary, Chair. So the recommendation is supported to Cabinet.
Thank you, Alison. Now going to move to agenda item 15, which is the Q1 performance indicators 23 to 24. And these can be found in pages 307 to 340. Officers, would like to add anything additional to the report?
Yes, please, Chair. Just to mention that a new quarterly performance reports are reported to members from Q1 23-24. The new format moves away from the table format that we've had previously reported for a number of years to graph format. The new reports also take into account feedback from members at this Cabinet Scrutiny Committee on the 5th of April this year. And also, in addition, to provide assurance to members in relation to trading on these new report formats. There'll be wider performance scrutiny training for members next month. And as part of that, we'll cover the new report formats on the agenda, training agenda. And if following the training and additional feedback, if there are any refinements that are required to be made, we'll do those refinements. That's all, Chair.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor Percy, you have a question?
Yeah, specifically on one of the performance indicators, it was in relation to customer services actually, and we'd had previous discussions, I think, in the subcommittee around the nature of the current performance indicator for customer services being time taken to answer calls. I just wondered whether there'd been we were any further along with our thinking in terms of a new performance indicator that might better reflect our actual performance in customer services.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. I'm going to bring in Sheena to ask the question.
Thanks, Chair, and hi, Councillor Percy. And yes, we did have some good discussions about the review of customer services. I'm really pleased to report back that over the summer we appointed a customer services manager, and the person that we've appointed to the post is a very experienced person in managing and delivering customer services. So what she has brought to the team are fresh eyes and a new energy. So what she has been doing is scoping the review of customer services. So I think that's our starting point. And the performance indicator will be a feature of the review itself. So we recognise that that performance indicator probably isn't the most useful bit of information in the world. We recognise that it's much more important that we get to the heart of the quality of the customer service itself. And that's certainly what we hope to do as part of that review. And just to add to that, part of the scope is clearly building in elected members as part of that review. So we will be involving elected members as we roll that review out. Thank you.
That's really helpful, Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Apologies, Shauna. Sheena, not Shauna. Councillor Sonia Reynolds, please.
Thanks, Chair. Shauna, I was looking very much at the percentage of permanent staff exiting the organisation, instigated or initiated by the employee, and wondering if we are still, losing, experienced, high qualified staff, and whether that's having a continued impact.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Back to Sheena.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Reynolds. It's difficult to give a yes or no answer to that question. Yes, we included in those figures will be experienced members of staff. Through the recruitment task force that we launched a couple of years ago, we implemented a range of initiatives. And what our data can show over the past couple of years is that the number of people that we are recruiting to the organisation has increased year on year since, and certainly since pre-pandemic days. And generally, the number of starters is outstripping the number of leavers, particularly when you take account of fixed-term contracts and all the rest of it, so employer-initiated leavers. So broadly speaking, we are holding our head above water when it comes to starters and leavers. But of course, there's no room for complacency, and there are parts of the council where recruitment is particularly difficult. So in general terms across the council, we're doing okay, but there are areas where it remains difficult.
Thank you, Sheena. Councillor Reynolds, are you happy with that? Members, I'd like to let you know that this report is for noting only. So we're now going to move on to item agenda number 16, which is compliments. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to add to the report?
Nothing further to add, Chair.
Councillor Patterson, you have a question?
Thank you very much, Chair. The question is, I know that the feedback from the general public is paramount for our ongoing, services to them. But do we make a note of when members actually compliment as well? Because I've had occasion to send in quite a few heartfelt compliments this year, and I wondered whether, as you know, we are sort of service users as well, because we represent our constituents. They bring problems to us in casework, and sometimes I think we should acknowledge if we send compliments in. So I just wondered if we did make a note of members' compliments.
To answer that, Chair, yeah, where there are member compliments, we do include them in the reports.
Lovely, that's fine. I just didn't know if they were included. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Clement-Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Does help if you take yourself off mute, I suppose. Is there a common thread to complaints? I mean, is there an analysis done about recurring complaints? So what comparisons, etc., to last year? And do we break down how many were about the service and how many were about staff behaviours, please?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. That information may be in the next item agenda on the complaints report, our report.
Sorry, I think I'd lost the will to live, and I have to admit I haven't even read it. There's so much in these papers today that I really didn't get. I got to as far as this. I'm ashamed to say, sorry.
Yeah, just to confirm, members, that we are on the complaints report.
Yeah,
My apologies, Chair. I thought they were taken as one, compliments and complaints. Sorry.
Louise McAndrew, would like to come in?
Hi, just to cover some of the questions from Councillor Clement William as well. Each of the individual directorates monitor the number of complaints that come in, and they are categorised within the directorate. So we could provide, if required, a breakdown and obviously the content, but for members on this occasion, we have provided overall figures.
okay. Sorry, Chair, I'm getting confused as well.
Can I add something to that as well? I'm sorry.
I think there's just so much. I think we made the point earlier, though. I think we have all struggled today.
Yes, thank you. We're going to bring Sean back in.
Thank you. As a rule of thumb as well, if we do get any upheld complaints, we put the detail into the reports and say what we've done with that upheld complaint as well, in terms of lessons learned type of thing.
Okay, thanks.
Any more questions, members? Members, I would like to tell you that this report is for noting only. Thank you. We're now moving on to agenda item 17, which is the Ombudsman Annual Letter 2022. We're not, oh, sorry, apologies, we're not scrutinising that, sorry. We're now going to move back into the Cabinet Scrutiny agenda, which is agenda item 6. It's the Forward Work Programme, which can be found on pages 45 and 46. Councillor Reynolds, you have a question?
Yes, Chair. It's wanting to know, really. I note that 8th of November, we've got safeguarding training report coming here. 8th of November on the Cabinet agenda says strategic school improvements. Is that meeting going to be a joint meeting with education and skills?
Just to confirm, Councillor, we haven't had any requests from any chairs at this point for a joint meeting.
Does it have to come from a chair? Because if it does, I think the Education and Skills Committee need informing that that is happening, so that the members can make their will known.
We can pick that up outside the meeting, Councillor Reynolds. Obviously, in discussions with the chair, there are procedures in the Constitution which sets out the arrangements which take place in that regard. So that's certainly something that can be addressed, and we'll ask the scrutiny officers to have that discussion with the appropriate members involved.
Thank you very much, Craig.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds. Members, just to remind you, this item is for noting only. Now moving on to agenda item 70, correction 7, urgent items, we have none. So next is agenda item 8, access to meetings. Can we have a proposer and a seconder to resolve to exclude the members of the public?
I would propose, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Boyne.
Can we please now ensure that all members of the public leave the meeting and that the recording is stopped, please?